The trial of the man who allegedly killed American sniper Chris Kyle continues with one very obvious note by the defense that would seem to preclude the case moving ahead. That and much more from the world where lawyers, guns, and money reside. Not really all the time, but it was worth the homage to Warren Zevon. From the law offices of O'Brien and Ryan LLP in Philadelphia, Heather Hansen joins us. Heather, good to see you again.
Great to see you, Ed.
By the way, just out of curiosity's sake, have you ever heard the song Lawyers, Guns, and Money?
I have.
Okay.
I have. Being a lawyer, you hear about it quite often.
I was just making sure that it wasn't just me. All right, let's go ahead and launch into at least two of those things. Lawyers and guns, unfortunately, get serious here. This is the Chris Kyle jury selection now for the man who is alleged to have killed Chris Kyle. The one thing that I have heard the defense say is, and I think they've got a point here, is it would seem to be completely impossible to get a fair and impartial jury anywhere close to that area of Texas because of who Chris Kyle was, certainly the media attention, but just Texas itself. You're not going to get a fair trial here. Doesn't this case have to move eventually?
You know what, Ed, I don't think moving would really help all that much. Across the country, people have seen this movie, and across the country, people have reacted by hating Eddie Ray Routh, who's the person who's on trial for killing Chris Kyle. I think that the only resolution, if the judge were to do it, and he won't, would be to postpone the trial altogether. The timing of this is just so serendipitous that this trial is starting just as the movie is the top grossing film of practically all time. Had they put off the trial, perhaps emotion would have died down and jurors would be a little bit less prejudiced. But hopefully they will be able to get a jury in this case. I don't think as quickly as they think, though.
Is it fair to say, and again, we're not psychologists here and we're just going to look at this from a legal standpoint, that with a defense of insanity, you're dealing with someone who planned this, carried the gun, did not just kill one person, but killed a second person. Even if he does suffer from PTSD, that's going to be awfully difficult to push to a jury, won't it?
I think the thing that's going to make it most difficult is the fact that when he left the scene and went to his sister's house, he said something, and I'm paraphrasing here, that I just traded my soul for a car. So he knew that what he did had been wrong, and that's a big part of the insanity defense in Texas. You must not be able to know what you have done is wrong. So I think that it's going to be very difficult. In fact, if he were to win on the insanity defense, I think it would be more a situation of sympathy or jury nullification than true insanity defense.
So would your best guess be at this time that yes, they will seat a jury and yes, the case will continue there, but then very logically we're going to see umpteen appeals years down the road about this case?
Without a doubt, unless he gets a defense verdict, a not guilty by reason of insanity verdict, I think we'll see lots of appeals. I do think a jury will be seated. I think it will be seated more quickly than in the Boston bomber case, which I know we're talking about a little bit later. I don't think it will be as quickly as they had hoped. They had said that they wanted to do openings by Wednesday, and I don't see that happening.
No, let's get to it right now, the Dzhokhar Tsarnaev case here, because they're talking about a change of venue. The judges being very stubborn at this point. The snow is keeping everybody in from actually getting to court today up in Boston. But you think there will be a change of venue here?
I think there should be a change in venue. It's different than the last case that we talked about, because that case, it was nationally that this movie was released, and it's nationally that people have this strong feeling. While the Boston bombing is something that is nationally known, the connections in Boston just can't be overstated. You know, one of the potential jurors who's been dismissed has a wife who worked in the hospitals and took in some of the victims. One of the potential jurors who's been dismissed had played soccer with the defendant. So when you have that many connections, it's really difficult to say that that's not going to prejudice the jury pool. I wish they would grant the petition to move it to a different venue to take care of this issue so that they can move forward.
Are we talking about then maybe New York City, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, but I guess something still in a major metropolitan area?
That's what they had been talking about, or even, Ed, if they moved it to Springfield, Massachusetts, which had been proffered before. If they did that, there would be less connections, less people who run the marathon regularly, less people who are at the finish line. I mean, they're meeting up with stuff like this with every juror that they interview. You
really think, seriously, that even if they move this case because of the national attention, that he could get a fair trial?
I am not sure that he will ever get a fair trial. The majority, I think 85%, I think is what the Boston Globe is reporting, think that he is guilty. That's going to happen across the country and probably across the world. but they're not going to have those same visceral connections that they do in Boston. And that perhaps will allow these people to listen to the defenses here.
All right, now go ahead and stand by. We got a lot of other things to carry here. We're going to take a break, come back, because another day, another judge, and another reason for the Supreme Court to hurry up and deal with the gay marriage issue. People are talking about that. Also, coming up next, for those with a certain knee replacement, maybe you should get your paperwork handy and be ready to answer a few simple questions, because it seems as if your knee may not be as solid as you may have once thought. That and so much more coming up when we continue right here on MidPoint. Okay, be seated. The jury's coming back in. More on the legal side of life with our expert and from the law offices of O'Brien and Ryan LLP in Philadelphia, Heather Hansen. All right, Heather, let's get right to this Alabama issue now. The Chief Justice basically taking the position that the states do not have to follow a federal court order. He wasn't going to allow any sort of gay marriage licenses to be issued today. The Supreme Court shot right back and said, that's the law. They're starting to do it. They're issuing the licenses today. It would seem as if, to be nice, this judge perhaps is not really operating with a full deck of cards.
You know, he's pushed this issue before, and he's really very much for states' rights over federal rights. He's pushing for this gay marriage thing not to go forward in Alabama. And some of the probate judges are actually listening to him. So while there are some in Alabama who are issuing the licenses, there are others who are not. And it won't be until this is finally decided by the Supreme Court that all of the state courts are going to have to fall in line and do what they're told.
Well, he's ultimately incorrect when he says that you don't have to follow the law of the feds, correct?
He is, but if you read the dissent by Clarence Thomas in this most recent decision about this Alabama situation, his point, Justice Thomas's, is that states do deserve some deference. And until the Supreme Court has finally said the final word, they should have stayed these cases. Now, that's not what happened. That's not what the majority said. And you are correct. We've talked about this before when we were talking about Governor Huckabee and his feeling that the states could do this. They can't. And we've seen that with integration. We will see that as well with gay marriage.
All right, it is definitely called the rule of law, and of course this will go on until April when the Supremes look at it, and then even well past that. I found this interesting. A company called Otis Med Corporation, the maker of the Otis knee. Now, this is a knee that people, as we sit right here today, the Otis knee, it is actually in a number of people, correct? They're wearing it and using it.
Well, yes, the knee itself is not necessarily an Otis knee. What the Otis knee system is, it's a system that led to different kinds of measurements during the knee replacement surgery.
Okay.
So it wasn't the knee that was put in their knee. It was the use of these different tools in order to do the measurements to put the knee in. So many people may have had a knee replaced using these Otis knee tools and not know it.
And the point that we're bringing this up is because apparently they didn't get clearance from the FDA for the guides before they started selling them. So now you've got people who are in a tremendous amount of pain. A number of people, the New York Times carried one of those stories. So there could be a lot of people out there. This could be a massive lawsuit. And just not only that, but you're thinking about the fact they didn't check with the FDA first?
You know, it's different classifications, and unfortunately these medical device companies are given the ability to sort of self-classify. So they classified themselves one way, needing little regulation, when they should have been classified another way, needing more regulation. So there's been both criminal and civil fines against the company, and you're bound to see some civil litigation as a result of this. It really sheds a light on the relationship between medical device manufacturers, patients, doctors. It's a very interesting relationship there.
I got about a minute left, and I definitely want to talk about this. I found this is interesting. The owner of a bar in Philadelphia, they're apparently, well, not the owner of the bar, but a city councilman in Philadelphia wants every business that serves alcohol to install exterior cameras after a young man drowned in the Schuylkill after leaving one of the bars. I think this is a fantastic idea because it would help a lot of these, I believe a lot of these bars get out of any legal action that might be filed against them for other reasons.
Yeah, but you know what, Ed? It also opens up legal action. What if your camera's not facing the right way? What if it's not working that day? What if you've lost the tape? The problem that I have with this proposed law is that it only applies to bars, and it's forcing bars to do something that is not within their purview. If the states and the government want to put cameras up on poles across the street from bars, that's fine. But to force a business establishment owner to go out and spend the money and maybe have the liability of putting something up themselves, I just don't agree with with it.
Ah, see, now you opened up another moment of that Pandora's box here. We're out of time, but we're going to have to talk about this. Next time we get together, we're going to talk about bars and establishments having to be responsible for people and the amount of alcohol they drink and then going out. Okay, I put it out there. There's the pregame. Heather Hansen, always a pleasure to have you on the show. We'll do that again next week.
You too, Ed. Take care.
All right, take care. Hey, where were you 51 years ago on this day? And even if you weren't even alive, your musical heritage was being decided on that evening. We'll tell you why right here on MidPoint.